Hi, and welcome to Dark Window. I'm your host, Jim Mann. Here on this program, I will be talking with many of the leading investigators, researchers, and authors on the topics of UFOs, UAPs, alien abductions, extraterrestrials, and a host of many other fascinating and related topics. So please join me and my guest for the next hour as we reach out. This is Dark Window on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. Hi, and welcome to Dark Window. My guest tonight is Chris DePerno. Now, Chris DePerno is a retired major crimes detective, a master interviewer, and an interrogator with 25 years of law enforcement experience. Chris was a former U.S. Marine serving in the elite Marine Security Guard Battalion as a U.S. ambassador's bodyguard. And now Chris also is a UFO investigator. As a matter of fact, Chris brings his skills to the UFO phenomena as the chief investigator. I guess he's the state director for New York for MUFON. He's the state director for MUFON in New York, working with a team in finding the truth of UFO sightings. I guess I'm trying to get that straight. But anyway, welcome, Chris DePerno. And how are you, Chris?
Good. Hey, Jim. Thanks for having me on.
I tried not to botch that up too bad.
You did great. I wouldn't. Hey, this is Chris DePerno, whatever kind of a deal. So you did fine.
It's really good to have you, man.
Thank you.
You know, I've known you for some time. I met you 3 or 4 years ago in California.
Yep. We had breakfast with scrambled eggs and cottage cheese.
They didn't have any bacon.
No bacon. They don't serve bacon in California. So I never want to go back to California. How's that?
Well, I think I might share your same sentiments. But anyway, it's really good to have you.
Thank you.
And we've got a little bit to talk about. We've got an hour. And you're quite a guy. I mean, if I would have read that entire bio, I'd have still been reading.
Thank you. I always say I was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, you know, we're going to touch on that a little bit because you've really got a story to talk about. You're involved on many different levels. First off, my first question to you, Chris, is what brings a man like you with your background in the military and in the detective work? What brings you to the ufology scene?
Well, Jim, that's a great question because I was a skeptic. I didn't believe in any of this stuff. I was like, this is all nonsense. This is all garbage. You know, there's people that they're either out of their minds or crazy, whatever. And cops are notorious for torturing other cops when they see some lights in the sky. Like if you're in the locker room changing and stuff and some guy says, geez, I saw something weird up in the sky, you know, the next day he would find stickers and little aliens and stuff swinging from the light bar and everything from, and we would just, create havoc for him for the next 48 hours. And, sure enough, he would never say again. And an alien could fall on his patrol car and he would just throw it off and keep driving. But I was a skeptic. And so when I retired from police work, I kept hearing, I love military planes, like Michael Schratt is a hero of mine, because I love all this military planes and everything like that. So I always thought, well, all this stuff is secret government work and there's no such things as UFOs. So I wanted to be a skeptic. I actually wanted to be a debunker. And so I got into the ufology to actually be a debunker and try to say, hey, listen, this is what this is and what it is. So when I joined MUFON because it seemed like the place where you could actually do investigations. And I said, I'm going to run a UFO investigation like I would run a homicide investigation. I'm going to follow the evidence where the evidence leads me. And of course, I started getting some cases where I went, holy God, there's something here with this. This doesn't make sense. This is not, anything military. Military can't do that type of stuff, even though they can do some amazing things. They still can't do some of the stuff that I've seen, read, had whistleblowers tell me, witnesses tell me and stuff like that. So during the course of time, I became a believer in this rather than a debunker. And so I became fascinated with the whole ufology aspect of what goes on.
You know, Chris, I'm still reading your bio here, and you had a lot going on back when you were in the service. You and the fact that and here's what brings credibility to the UFO scene, to all of us who have put our heart and soul in research and investigation of modern ufology. Guys like you. Now, Chris, you spent some time in the military. Mm-hmm. You were actually awarded a Medal of Valor. Tell me about that.
Well, I was in the military. I was awarded a Navy Commendation Medal because one of the embassies I actually went to had a siege. The embassy that I was at, just before I got there, they assassinated an ambassador. I was actually on my way to Vietnam. So they yanked me right off the plane. They said, get off the plane, because I was like, I'm going to Vietnam. Oh my God. And then when they said, hey, listen, you're being reassigned. You're going to, the Middle East. And I went, wow, that's great. Middle East, hey, they got great food there and everything else. Had I not known, though, they just assassinated an ambassador there. I was going to that place. And a war broke out right in the middle of where the embassy was. So, as a matter of fact, they couldn't fly me in. They had to put me on a fishing boat. I went to Beirut, Lebanon first. And they said, well, we can't fly you into Nicosia, Cyprus, because there's a war going on, and they just bombed out the airport. So we're going to put you on a fishing boat. It's going to take 3 days for you to get there. And it took 3 days of me locked in the cabin eating candy bars, because that's the only thing I had, to get to where I was stationed. So I was stationed there. And a few months after I was there was 6,000 people that attacked the embassy. And there were 7 Marines, myself included, and we repelled 6,000 people with tear gas and everything else at our disposal to do that. So the Secretary of the Navy thought that was a great thing and awarded all of us, all 7 Marines, a Navy Commendation Medal. I was put up for a Bronze Star. But Henry Kissinger said, because it was in the time of war, you can't have the Bronze Star. We'll give you a Navy Com. So, wrong place, wrong time.
Well, okay. So you were also involved in training as a nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare technician.
Yeah.
Wow.
I used to give. After I got out of the Marines, I joined the National Guard, Army National Guard, and I became an intelligence sergeant. So what my job was being battlefield intelligence, and I specialized in nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare. And so what happened is that I would go out, with scouts, into enemy territory or wherever, and try to collect as much intelligence. And I was part meteorologist, part, intelligence officer, part everything, because I would go back and give the battalion commander briefings on how the Russians at that time, would use nuclear, biological, chemical warfare on our troops. So I would have to give wind direction. I would have to give terrain and stuff like that in order to keep our troops safe. So, eventually I kind of went, wow, this stuff is getting really, really scary, because, they made nuclear weapons so small you could put them in a briefcase. They made biological weapons that was so scary that it's unbelievable, that the stuff that they made years ago, can you imagine what they have now? So, yeah, that was my job, is to brief the battlefield commander on the ability of the Russians to use these type of weapons against us.
So here's my comment to a lot of our listeners, is that when we have American, and Chris, I'm going to say heroes, when we have our military men who are so responsible for so much. And now they're working in the field of ufology because they view ufology as a very real issue.
Absolutely.
This is the kind of stuff that brings credibility to ufology. Now, my next question is, when you got out of the military, you got involved in the New York Police Department or?
Mm-hmm.
And
well, I was actually becoming a gym teacher. I wanted it so much to be I loved sports, and I said, I'm going to go into becoming a gym teacher. Started going to college, and an old police chief that called me up and said, "Hey, you want a part-time job?" And I go, "Well, yeah. Well, what is it?" "Well, I got a part-time position to become a police officer. So would you like it?" He says, "I heard you got out of the Marines and everything." He says, "I'll send you to school." Yeah, okay. I was like, yeah, money. I was broke at the time. Yeah, what do I got to lose? So I went there and I got hooked, and I loved police work ever since, and eventually became a major crimes detective with a large metropolitan police department, and it was a great career. I had spent 25 years, solving homicides and rapes and shootings and stabbings and white collar crimes and everything. You name it, I've done it.
So you were, quote, the homicide detective, or at least one of them.
Well, yeah. I did more than just homicides. I did shootings and stabbings. Everybody that was in the criminal investigation division were all major crimes detectives. And so we had to be a jack of all trades. We had to do homicides. And then if, something came up like a shooting that the guy didn't die, we still had to investigate that and stuff. So it made us actually better because we didn't just do one single thing. We had a variety of things that we did. And I think that made us more proficient because we were able to use, different techniques on different things.
So as far as sort of honing your investigative skills, I'm going to say, what better investigator for MUFON would be than someone with your background?
My specialty, Jim, was interrogation and interview and interrogation. So my job was to go into the interview room with murderers and rapists and everything and try to sell them jail. Actually, I was like a salesman, try to get them to confess and to say, hey, listen, you're better off in prison than you are, stuff like that. Confess about what you did and, we'll talk about it and stuff. So I went to school for it. They sent me to school for interview and interrogation. It was a very hard school. You really was a mind-blowing experience. But I used that trait coming out for ufology. And that's why I became a believer, because you could see the body language in some of the people I were interviewing. These people were terrified. These people were really telling the truth on what they saw, what they observed, what they felt, with abductees and everything else. And after 25 years, you can tell when somebody's lying. You could tell by their body language. You could tell by, the neurolinguistics of their eyes and everything else. And you could see the fear in their body language as they're telling this story about what they said. So, it was definitely, I had people who were abducted, and during their abduction, you could actually start seeing them start to sweat a little bit, as they're telling this story. You could watch their eye movement where they're not trying to create something. They're recalling something as much as they can. And you could see a little bit of stuttering in their voice because that unconscious fear is starting to come back. When somebody tells a very horrifying story and they get into it, that trauma that they've experienced during the course of time, they start to relive it a little bit. And you could see a little bit of shaking in their hands. You could see a little bit of sweat starting to come out, especially around the brow area and stuff of that nature. You could see them starting to look down like, why did this happen to me type of thing. So when you see this type of experience in people, you come to realize that the trauma and the terrifying trauma event that they occurred is real. It's not something they're making up. It's there.
So, as a UFO investigator, and I know this from experience, somebody sees a UFO, they report it to MUFON.
Correct.
Okay? The UFO is gone.
Yeah.
Not another soul in the neighborhood that saw that object.
Right.
So all we've got to investigate as a UFO investigator, I contact that person. You contact that person.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing we've got to investigate is, number one, the credibility of the person making the report.
Yes.
And because of your years of experience as an interrogator, and I hate to use that word interrogator when it comes to,
but that's actually an accurate word, Jim. I mean, when people hear, well, you were an interrogator, they think I took a phone book to them and slapped them across the side of the head. And that's nothing. I mean, I'd be in jail myself if I did. An interrogator is more, there's a difference between interviewing and interrogation. And so when you had somebody who witnessed a UFO, you want to interview them first, and then you go into a mode of interrogation. And the reason being is you want to get their story first, see what they're saying. Then you start breaking down the story into parts where you can concentrate on that certain part of the story. That's where the interrogation part comes in. The details. What's going on? Where were you at the time that the sighting happened? What were you doing? Were you preoccupied with something? How long did you see this? What direction were you in? What was the weather doing at the time? Was it raining? Was it storming? Was there something blowing into the wind? So there's a difference. You get the story from them first, which is the interview part, and then you go into the interrogation where you're asking them the questions to detail what they saw, so you can determine, is this an actual sighting, or maybe they just saw a plane, or maybe they just saw a bird or something else in the sky, like Starlinks. I mean, as well as I do, Jim, ever since Elon Musk put up those satellites, we get all kinds of calls from people seeing that they think Mars is invading.
So you were a police detective.
Mm-hmm.
You guys sort of laughed and giggled out the side of your mouth when people talked about UFOs.
Oh, yeah.
You were a skeptic, as why not? Okay.
Yeah.
It was sort of nonsense because that's the way UFO people were treated, as like nut jobs.
Oh, yeah. Tin hat peoples. I call them tin hat peoples all the time. I go, because police used to get calls for people that saw UFOs, and they didn't know who else to call, so they called the police. So we'd have to go and go there. I saw the lights in the sky, and it was hovering, and then it took off at incredible speed. And I'm saying to myself, "Yeah, where's your tin hat, pal?"
So I guess
what's that?
So I'm going to say. So I guess my question is, Chris, is that you retired from law enforcement. How did you find MUFON, and why did you come this direction?
Because I love mysteries, and it's a mystery. I guess it's one of the most important mysteries in the world. Are we alone in the universe? Is there other civilizations? Are there other species? Are they coming here? Are they visiting us? Are they abducting us? Why are they abducting us? What's the reason behind it? And if they are, why don't they just land, say, hey, we're here. Mind if we take some samples and take a little bit of this, take a little bit of that? So, what do they consider us? We look at them and say, hey, they're this or that and that and this. How do they look at us? Do they look at us being so primitive? They look at us like we're ants? Do they look at us as a growing species that they can work with someday? Or do they just look at us as a petri dish where, they do experiments on?
So, okay. So coming up to today, what do you do with MUFON today?
I'm the state director of New York. So I have a team of about 14 investigators, 10 to 14 investigators. And I have a chief investigator who's absolutely phenomenal, John Lombardo. He's great. And I have an assistant state director, Tommy Nesser, is just phenomenal. I mean, we have a great team. Tommy Nesser, John Lombardo, and all the field investigators are top notch. And they're very, very dedicated to what they do. And I supervise that. And we work on trying to get the answers that people are asking. They ask these questions: are we alone in the universe? And that's such an important question. People don't realize how important that question is, because once that question is answered, it will change everything in the world.
Mm-hmm. So, as a MUFON state director in New York, how many cases do you guys do? How many cases do you actually investigate every year?
Well, we only used to do about 10 to 14 cases a month, but we've jumped up to 24 to 32 a month. It's almost double the load. And so we're pretty hopping. Now, a lot of those cases, they're lights in the skies. We can explain probably 90% of what's taking place. It's that 10% that really intrigues us, because there's certain things that is just you can't explain by physics. You cannot explain by the technology we have today. Things can't move in that type of direction. Things cannot move as fast and just disappear. That I've seen myself. I mean, now that I'm looking at the sky, I actually had a sighting down the Hudson Valley area, and I'm, that which really made me believe, because I'm watching this thing take off at an incredible speed. I mean, you only seen that type of speed in the movies.
Of all the cases that you've been involved with since you've been in MUFON, you were a chief investigator too at one time.
Yes.
Now you're state director. But of all the cases, Chris, that you were involved with, what do any of them stick out in your mind as sort of extraordinary?
Yeah, I had 3 or 4 that are absolutely phenomenal. First of all, I had one case in the Hudson Valley that really took off. It was I got a call from a detective sergeant. He's now a friend of mine. Anyways, he was on duty one night, and as he's driving, he sees a triangle hovering over a lake, and it's very close. This lake is not a big lake; it's small enough, and he's close enough to the lake that he, and it's not that dark where he cannot identify. He identifies it as a black triangle hovering over the lake. And so what happens is, as this object is hovering over the lake, it drops a barrel-sized object, not a barrel, but a barrel-sized object into the lake. And he's witnessing all this, and he's going, this is incredible. And so other people in this village who live around the lake have also seen this triangle coming back, at times. Well, now after that happens, all of a sudden there's these lights inside the lake that are underwater like a submarine, and they're moving at an incredible speed all around the lake. And nobody can figure out what the hell is going on here, because one, you got an alien craft, some kind of craft, dropping something into this lake. And next thing is, the next 3 or 4 nights, people are witnessing lights underneath the lake, incredibly bright, going all around it. And then there's stuff happening in the lake that just doesn't make sense. For instance, there's a complete perfect circle now that does not freeze up in the winter. Now, down in the Hudson Valley area, this lake freezes every year, freezes completely over, except now for this one area that's a complete circle, right where this barrel-sized object was dropped, that does not freeze. And they send me pictures of it and stuff. And now they have an algae bloom that's there now, and they can't really understand why all of a sudden they get an algae bloom. So do they think it's the nitrates or phosphates from the runoff into the lake which will cause it? But we took water samples from the lake, and there is not. The MUFON lab analyzed, and they says, Chris, you don't see any nitrates and phosphates in this. So and that would be where the strongest part of the nitrates and phosphates would be, is right there. So that was an amazing, absolutely amazing story. And then we come to find out one of the most secret labs in the world was right there, and nobody even knew about it, called the Tower Building built by Alfred Loomis, a billionaire physicist years ago, that this place did all kinds of different experiments. I mean, they had brought in all the Nazi scientists to this place, right where this lake was years ago. They were doing brainwave experiments there. They were doing direct energy weapons experiments there. They had the U.S. Air Force in there. They had Enrico Fermi and Albert Einstein there. The equations for the atomic bomb were actually built. And this is all because of a sighting on the lake. We discover all this.
How deep is this lake?
It's not that deep. It's not that big of a lake. But really? For some reason, it seems to be the hub of such UFO activity. I mean, people have said they see UFOs there all the time. That's not uncommon anymore. I mean, they actually had to pass a law right outside the park, that they passed a law that you're not allowed to stop your car on the highway and watch the UFOs. It's against the law.
Seriously.
Yes, they actually passed a local ordinance because people were stopping on this. There were so many UFO sightings there, triangles, boomerangs, going right down the highway. People have said, I looked up, I have one of those sunroofs. I looked up and I thought it was a 747. And I realized that it's a boomerang shining a light down on me. And it's not like she's just on the road alone. People are on the side of the road pulling over, right? Seriously. Watching this.
Has any of the have you guys, and I'm sure you guys have done water samples and soil samples around the lake? I think
we
you and
did
I
water
talked
samples.
about this. Yes, I think you and I talked about this case back when I was a state director here in Arizona. Mm-hmm. And what did you find in the water samples?
The water sample, we were expecting nitrates and phosphates because it would cause the algae bloom. Excuse me. The algae bloom, see, here's the problem. The algae bloom is not at the edge of the lake. It's in the middle of the lake. So how does an algae bloom grow in the middle of the lake?
Yeah, that's different.
That they didn't have before. And so because the nitrates and phosphates would be runoffs from the grass, fertilizer, and all that stuff running off into the lake. That's normally how you get that type of chemicals into a lake. So we took water samples on the lake shores to see, because that would be the strongest concentration. And there's nothing there. So now how do you get this algae bloom, in the middle of the lake? Well, so we asked if we could go into the lake, grow out there, and they said absolutely not. You're not. They won't. MUFON was ready to send a dive team up. We had everything ready to go, and the powers to be at the lake, the village, said nope, we're not allowing any divers into the lake. So why not send a dive team up and allow us to do that? And they absolutely refused.
What about, Patricia's asking me a question here. She says, what about fish and wildlife? Did it affect any of those?
No, we had no report. And that's a great question, because we were looking to see if there would be dead fish or dead wildlife drinking it that would have said, okay, there's got to be some chemical. But there's nothing, Jim. There's nothing there there's nothing in that lake that would pollute it, because they do not allow motorboats in that lake. You can only have a rowboat or a sailboat and stuff. They try to discourage any type of motoring in that type of lake. So now we kind of have this situation where the lake is not really polluted, but yet there's something going on that's causing this to happen. But then why would the ice not fully go cover this lake as it normally did? Why is there a perfectly circle there that is in the middle of that lake that is not frozen over? It's clear. It's just, there's just water. Why that area when everything surrounding it is frozen?
Well, there's still a lot of unanswered questions on that one. And you guys closed the investigation on it, Chris? Or
we did. We are still. when we take an investigation like that, it's closed officially, but unofficially it's always open because we're always collecting stuff in the Hudson Valley area. I call the Hudson Valley area the Area 51 of the East Coast, because so many things have happened down there that people don't realize, that it's just so top secret. But it's there's no gates around it. It's hidden. But if you want to go into this village, you can't go in. It's a normal village, and it has a police force. But as you drive up to this village, you're stopped at a gate, and you have to be escorted to wherever you're going to. Yeah, because they're very wealthy people.
So it's a gated community. And
it's an extremely gated community, but it's not private. It's public. Yeah. So they're allowed to have their own police force.
Can they go swimming in the lake?
What's that?
Can you go swimming in the lake?
I guess. I mean, to be honest with you, I've never seen anybody swimming in there, but I mean, there's people that live and boat and everything by the lake, so they could probably swim in. Now, with the algae bloom, they kind of, when that algae bloom occurs, they kind of caution people not to, have their pets drink the water or anything else, but they haven't determined what's causing it yet.
So let's back up to when you were in law enforcement. I mean, this is interesting, and I'd like to go a little further into some of the other cases that you've done. Let's go back to law enforcement days. Now, did you go on some of these UFO cases when you were in law enforcement?
Yeah, but be honest with you, Jim, I thought they were all just crackpots. I mean, I'm just being honest with you. I mean, I go to these UFO cases. Of course, we get called after the incident took place, with missing time we took when somebody said they were missing for a while, we always considered it a missing person. We never thought there was an alien abduction. I mean, that just never crossed our mind, and then somebody said I was taken by aliens. Then we went, okay, yeah, all right. And so, you were always polite and everything, but you took it with a grain of salt until you really found out, hey, there's alien abductions really taking place. Years later, I went, holy cow, there's something really going on with this. But yeah, I've been on the calls with people who have claimed to have seen UFOs that have, landed during my career, especially when, out in the rural area. We would get calls out in the rural area, and you'd go, I don't know what those little those little indentations in the dirt mean. Well, there was a craft there. I go, well, it's not there now, so I don't know. I could have been stepping into the middle of a hotbed radiation. I wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
And stuff. So
in the military or in the law enforcement, will you guys ever have any sort of training for UFO sightings? Because I know in the handbook for firemen, okay, at least here in Arizona, there is a chapter in the fireman's handbook about what do you do in case of a downed, unidentified craft, a UAP or whatever.
Well, I had as a police officer, I've had airplanes crash. I've been to 2 airplanes that have crashed. And so, but never a UFO. I mean, and nobody's ever said this is but even with an airplane that goes down, you've always called the military and the National Transportation Safety Board and the FAA, and they always tell you, just stay away, because if something blows up, you're going to go with it, kind of a deal.
So speaking of the military, let's go back to when you were in the military. Okay. Any UFO things happening back when you were in the military?
Well, funny you should say that, Jim, because I was privy to be able to see some of the amazing things that the U.S. government had created. Now, years ago when YouTube was flying, I was on a secret base that had a U2 team with a U-tube, and we weren't even allowed. Once we entered this certain building, we were not even allowed to talk. We could not even talk. That's how secret this base was. That we went in, they briefed us beforehand in an open field. We were not in any type of area. We were, either put into a classified room and stuff, and said, listen, you're going to go to this place. You have to pick up some classified material, and any type of top secret classified material had to have armed guards to pick it up and transport it. And he says, you're going to go to this place. Now, once you get to this certain place, you do not talk. You do not talk to your partner. You do not talk to anybody there. You're going to walk in. You're going to see things that you will never discuss. And you are going to pick up what they give you, and you bring it back. And then you do not talk about it. You do not talk about it as you're walking out of the building. You don't talk about it as you're walking out of the base. But as I said, I walked in and I saw this humongous spy plane. And, right away, I said, what the hell? And of course, nobody knew what a U-2 was back then, but I looked at this thing and I went, what the hell is this? And they literally had, those things that are made with a theater, those old rings that the theater used to have to guide people into the theater.
Exactly. Yes.
They had that with 4 armed guards with rifles around this thing.
Seriously.
And they would have shot me if I went over that thing. I would have been, Mama's little boy would have been in a coffin and stuff. Well, so I mean, they don't screw around. But that's what made me believe a lot of the stuff that we saw in the sky was ours. It was amazing, because here I am witnessing. I'm actually up close seeing this unbelievable development in technology. So, and then I go, well, wait a minute. I started studying this stuff, and I go, the stuff that we're seeing out in the air nowadays, that's not a U-2. That's not an SR-71. That's not, that is something way, way different.
Something way different. And now, nowadays, when you're involved with UFOs and with ufology and organizations like MUFON, you hear about things like a certain retired military person is dying. They're on their deathbed and they want to make a confession. So no confessions from Chris DePerno.
No confessions from Chris DePerno. I'm not on my deathbed yet, but I'll tell you, Jim, when I am, you'll be the first. I'll call you and say, Jim, I'm dying. Here's what I know. How's that?
Here's what I know.
Here's what I know. I'm going to tell you, and then I'll croak on the phone for you. How's that?
Yeah. A lot has changed in just the recent years, just since 2018, 2017, 2018, when all of the confessions, if you will, started coming from the Department of Defense and Department of the Navy, and with the with the sightings off the USS Nimitz, and some of the other military people started coming forward and admitting that, yes, the government has not been quite as transparent or has been quite so forward about things. And this has been going on for years. Roswell, back in 1947, the big Kecksburg UFO that came down sometime in the 60s. Sure. And military was involved in the cleanup of those areas. Mm-hmm. And those guys were debriefed and told,
keep your mouth shut.
Keep your mouth
or
shut.
You're going to end up in a box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
you hear those stories, Jim, but I will tell you, I was briefed that way one time.
Were you?
I was told that I was going to end up disappearing because I happened to walk into a room. There's in an American embassy, there's certain places I don't care what clearance you have, you don't go in those rooms.
Right.
You just don't. And if you find them open, don't be foolish enough to walk across the door, which dummy did. Okay. And I'm not going to say what I saw, but, I'm just telling you, I had the chief of station for the Central Intelligence Agency, who was a friend of mine, pretty much tell me that I was going to end up in a wooden box if I should ever do that again, and stuff. So when these people, these whistleblowers come out and say, I was threatened or this, they're probably telling the truth, because I've been in that situation where somebody, and they do it very diplomatically. You're kind of like, going, Yeah, I kind of get your drift, and yeah, I won't ever do it again, sir. You know.
So, Chris, you're a very interesting guy, and I've said that about 50 times now in this.
Wrong place, wrong time, Jim. I never played the lottery because I'm the one that get the fraud card.
So I'm telling my listeners here, guys, folks, Chris DePerno is the real deal. And he's got the experience to back it up, and he's extremely credible. Now let's move forward to what you're doing today. Let's talk about, you do 2 radio programs.
Yes.
On KGRA right here on this network.
Mm-hmm.
You do 2 programs. So what are they?
Well, I do one called MUFON What's Up, which I'm an assistant co-host on with Katie Page and Tara Diulis, who you both know.
Well, can you tell us who Katie Page and Tara?
Yeah, Katie Page is the state director for Colorado, and Tara Diulis is a field investigator for MUFON. They're very experienced in the ufology field, and they bring a lot to this radio show. That it's a nice balance because, Katie knows a lot about what's going on in the Midwest, Colorado area that she brings to the table. Plus, she has done things similar to Skinwalker Ranch, so she brings that to the table. Tara brings a lot of experience from Arizona, where she was a field investigator, did a lot of investigations and stuff. So she knows what she's talking about when it comes to ufology. And both of them, they don't see a Martian around every tree. And that's the most important thing about ufology.
That's what you like about it.
And that's what I like about it, is because
yes.
I think that's important, that you have to be still, even though you're a believer, you have to be a little bit of a skeptic to be able to determine whether this is a legitimate sighting or not. Because some people, they hear this incredible story and they, oh my God, this must be real. It must be real. And it's, it can be explained. If you go into detail, you'll see that, well, it's a great sighting, but it's not a UFO. It's known to us. So that's the one thing I like. I bring a little bit of humor to the ufology field. I like joking around with that because, it is a serious subject, but it's a fascinating subject where you can go in different directions with it. And I'd like to bring a little humor to it. And then I do the police show, which I love, because we have just tremendous stuff going on with law enforcement.
The I Detective show?
Yeah, the I Detective show that we do, once a week, every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. What a wonderful show, because we're able to show police what really police work is all about. What they get the idea of police work is what they see on television. And that's farthest from the truth. It's nothing like that. And, 1 minute it's tragedy. I will always tell you that sometimes it's 45 minutes of boredom and 15 minutes of sheer terror. And
I've seen some of those I Detective programs. You guys don't mince words at all.
No,
that program.
No. We go after the politicians. We just did one tonight on New York, and we had a New York State Assemblyman on that blew the whistle on Albany, and the stuff that he was telling us. I mean, they want to put up in New York. They want to put up concentration camps, intern camps. They're going to call them health camps, But the bottom line is, they want to do a bill in New York that will allow the authorities to come into your home, and if they deem your wife, your children, or anything a health hazard or something of a danger, they can take you out of the home, not with a doctor, not to a hospital, but to a camp, and keep you there until they deem you healthy enough to come back.
That's scary.
It's extremely scary because you can't get a lawyer, you can't have an appeal, they don't even want you to have a phone call. And so you're put into this camp until somebody who says, well, we'll let them back. How scary is that?
So basically, they arrest you and without any sort of due process, or they just that's crazy.
You hit it right on the head. They take you out of your home without a warrant, without anything, put you into a camp, and say, okay, you're here until we deem you safe to go back to society.
Now, do you guys have regular guests on iDetective?
Every week, yes.
Every week.
We have all kinds of guests from people who have worked for the Central Intelligence Agency, people who have worked for the Department of Defense, people who have worked in police work all over the United States. We've had them all because it's important for people to see what's really going on in the world today when it comes to criminal justice and law enforcement.
That's great. And you've got regulars on there. I mean, there's you and who else?
Marianne Robb is a co-host.
Tell the listeners a little bit about Marianne.
Marianne is great. Marianne is the no nonsense girl on our show. She gets on and she tells it the way it is, and she's from Arizona, and she's with MUFON. She was a field investigator with MUFON and stuff, so we had that in common. But she comes on and she'll question, like she should, the guests to make sure that they're legitimate and make sure that their information is accurate. Very good at what she does.
And you have another person on there with you.
We have Randy Sutton, who's on with us. Randy Sutton is the president of the Wounded Blue Society that take care of wounded police officers all through the United States. And he's no nonsense. I mean, he goes after the woke politicians and people who want to do corruption and everything, and he's very good at what he does. And then we have Buck Savage, who's a retired detective sergeant, and he brings humor to it because we have a thing that called the dumbest criminals of the week, and I
love that part.
Yeah, we have videos of criminals that just fall out of the ceiling or drop their gun, and they can't get it, or
hey, Patricia, go ahead and pop that back up there, iDetective. Okay, so this comes on KGRA Digital Broadcasting Wednesday
at 6 p.m. Eastern.
6 p.m. Eastern. Okay, and it's what, an hour, 2 hours?
1 hour show.
1 hour show.
Yep. And we bring everything to the table: news, humor, guests, and we just we call it telling the real deal of law enforcement.
And let's go back to MUFON What's Up.
Sure.
What are the kind of guests? Okay, first off, MUFON What's Up is also KGRA.
Mm-hmm.
And show times are
8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time to 10. 2 hours. So
that's actually a 2 hour gig.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And who are some of the guests?
Well, we've had all kinds of guests. We've had Michael Schratt on, as you had. He's fascinating. He's fantastic. We had James Goodall on. We've had Mark D'Antonio on. We've had abductees. We've had, I think Travis Walton was on one time, and Terry Lovelace has been on, and we had Jim Mann on. He was a phenomenal guest that was on the show, and and be honest with you, you were one of the best guests we've ever had on the show because your abduction situation, and I'm not puffing you, but I'm just explaining that your abduction situation is so crucial that people should be, if anybody needs to study an abduction, it should be Jim Mann's, because it's an amazing type of abduction where it tells you partly what they're trying to do.
Now, when there's three of you like that, you guys bounce questions off each other. I know you and I were talking earlier about the importance of challenging your guests.
I'm the challenger.
Without being rude, but
right. I like a healthy debate because what you want to do is basically is when a guest comes on, you want to vet them. You know, you don't get a chance to vet them before the show, but you want to vet them on the show. Look, you're explaining about something that's so phenomenal, so unbelievable, and you're telling this story or situation. Well, you need to be challenged. You need to be debated on it, because the listeners are want to have these strong questions answered. And if you just throw softball questions, it does no good. You got to ask the hard questions. They got to stand up. Look, they're telling a remarkable story. They got to stand up to that story and say, hey, listen, here's the deal. Here's why, and challenge me when I ask that question. I expect them to challenge me and say, well, you know, this is why I know that this happened, because A, B, C, and D.
Right. Well, we're just about out of time here. And all I want to say to the listeners is, if you are a regular on KGRA, a listener, make sure that you get over there and watch MUFON What's Up and iDetective. I highly recommend both those programs, and you won't be disappointed with these. And Chris is the guy to challenge in a good way. In a good way,
yeah. I mean, you know, I just want to say this at the end is that we got to be careful with ufology, because people will not take it seriously if we don't debate and challenge the stories that are coming out. If we just accept everything that comes out without questioning it, without, you know, looking at its history and stuff, we won't be taken seriously. And this is a very serious study, ufology.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, we're pretty much out of time, and I want to thank you for coming on my show.
Thank you for
Chris
having
and
me.
I have been friends for a few years. We're always bouncing things off each other about how this works and that works, and how KGRA works. And
I thought you were going to say KGB for a second.
How the KGB works, and the CIA and the FBI. Again, thanks, Chris. And
you're welcome. Thank you, Jim, for having me.
On behalf of Chris, myself, and of course my program manager behind the scenes, Patricia Wilkinson, thank you for joining us here on another episode of Dark Window, and good night.